Welcome to the On-Demand Module 3, Teaching Success with EDGE Levels A through C. My name is Sean Lowry, Technology Consultant for National Geographic Learning, and I will be your presenter for this session. This is one of 5 on-demand training modules to help prepare you to use EDGE in your classroom. Hopefully you have already viewed Module 1, Start the Year Off Right with EDGE. If not, you may want to stop this session and view it now. If you're using EDGE Fundamentals, be sure to view Module 2, and if your school or district has purchased e-assessment or the online coach, please be sure to view Module 4 and or 5 to help get you started. In this session, we will be taking a thorough look at the instruction in EDGE Levels A through C. We'll begin with the unit launch and how to read lessons, which set the stage for learning. Next, we'll take a detailed look at the cluster instruction, including the prepare to read and before reading lessons that help prepare students for success. Then we will focus on the writing instruction in EDGE, from the built-in writing lessons to the comprehensive writing projects. And finally, we will take an in-depth look at the assessment tools EDGE offers for progress monitoring and reteaching. Okay, let's begin by reviewing the instructional path for each unit. Each unit begins with the unit launch and how to read lesson. Then we move into the cluster instruction. Each unit contains 3 clusters, and within each cluster there is a main reading selection and an adjunct selection. In all levels, students engage in various unit workshops, including workplace workshops, vocabulary workshops, and listening and speaking workshops. The first 6 units also include a writing project that steps students up through the process, focusing on a specific writing mode and writing trait for each project. And finally, the unit wrap-up gives students the opportunity to present their unit projects and reflect upon their own reading and writing. Please turn to a unit launch in your Teacher's Edition. For this session, I'll be using Level A, Unit 1 as an example, but everything that I share will be applicable to Levels B and C as well. If you focus on the purpose of each lesson rather than the specific content, you will be able to easily apply what you learn to the level you are working with, because each unit follows the same pattern. The main goals of the unit launch are to engage the students and set the stage for learning. And remember, the driving force for each unit is the essential question. As a reminder, essential questions are the engaging and enduring questions we all face. They give students insight into questions central to their lives and make reading matter. Essential questions, or EQs, reflect the issues students face in their own lives. They provide students with the motivating context for reading and learning, and promote rich discussions. Essential questions also have no simple, easy answer, which allows students to become active participants in their own learning. The first step in the unit launch is to engage students in the unit theme and provide opportunities for them to discuss the essential question. Look at the essential question provided here on the slide. What influences how you act? Now, just take a moment to think about your own response to that question. There is no simple answer to the question, is there? As students discuss the essential question, you will begin to develop a class mind map where they can brainstorm their initial thoughts in regards to the essential question. As you can see in the example here, students are asked to share examples of something they do and the reasons or influences for doing it. Now take a look at the quotations provided. Do you see how they connect to the essential question? When students begin to discuss the quotations, you can see in the bottom of the teacher wrap that each unit launch includes cooperative learning activity that helps students develop their listening and speaking skills as well as their perspectives on the quotations. Over time, these structures provide students with a different level of support. Let's look at one from each level. In the fishbowl from Level A, Unit 1, one group of students will be able to just listen, first providing a risk-free environment and lowering the affective filter for your English learners. In Four Corners, Level B, Unit 1, the affective filter is still low, but students are all asked to participate in a group discussion at the same time. And finally, the team word webbing activity in Level C, Unit 1, requires all students in the group to participate in the discussion and write their own thoughts down. Most likely, you'll be working with students at varying proficiency levels within each level of EDGE. If this is the case, these cooperative learning activities can easily be modified to meet the needs of all your students. For example, if you are a beginning speaker working on level C on the team word webbing activity, you may want to pair them up with a more advanced speaker. The next step in the unit launch asks students to engage with the visual and make interpretations based on how the visual relates to the essential question and unit theme. The large collage in this unit engages students in a discussion on the interpretation of the visual, which is also related to the essential question. Take another moment to look at the visual here and think about it in relation to the essential question. What influences how you act? To me, the signs obviously influence my actions while I'm driving, but the trash along the side of the road may prompt me to join an Adopt a Highway program. The critical viewing questions ask students to relate the visual to the essential question and explain their answer. Responding to and interpreting visuals is tied to high school standards and is another opportunity to engage students in a discussion. The final step in the unit launch engages students in a debate related to the essential question. Students are presented with facts or another item such as a photograph or cartoon that are related to the essential question, as well as a couple of questions to use in small group as debate starters. You can already see that the students have lots of opportunities to speak out about issues that matter to them, something students at this age love to do, and a key element of active participation. They have a reason to be engaged in the classroom. It's a fact that when students are more engaged in instruction, they are more likely to stay in school. That's the big first step toward meeting the goal of graduation. Within each unit, students have the opportunity to work on a unit project. These projects provide students with collaborative learning opportunities, are designed to engage students in a real-world way with the essential question, and allow students to connect their out-of-school literacy with the skills they're learning in the unit. The projects also focus on a specific study skill and result in some type of multimedia piece. The unit project sets the stage for the types of interpersonal project-based tasks students will face in the world after high school. They also help adolescents assert their own autonomy, key for motivation and engagement. Additionally, students have the choice to read books related to the essential question in the Edge Library. These books offer extended reading opportunities as a variety of reading levels and genres. Special in-book supports make these titles accessible to striving readers and English learners. And don't forget that there are student journals that students can download on their own on the Learning Edge website, as well as teacher's guides for each book that are available on the Teaching Edge. Following the unit launch, the instructional path continues with the How to Read lesson. Here, we introduce students to the genre and reading strategy that will be the focus of the unit. These lessons allow students to connect skills and processes involved in the reading strategy to something they already know how to do in their everyday lives. The first element of the How to Read lesson is to engage and connect students to the genre and type of text they will be reading. A demo text helps us do this. The demo texts were created by one of the program authors, Michael W. Smith, to encapsulate the specific aspects of the genre at hand for each unit. For teachers working with English learners, the built-in specialized supports in the teacher wrap provide access to the demo text. Next, students make personal connections to build competence and connect reading to your life. Within this step, students are also taught exactly what the reading strategy means in relation to their own lives. Connect reading to your life shows students who may have negative opinions about their abilities as readers that they really do have valuable cognitive abilities that they can bring to bear on texts. Now it's time to teach the strategies students will use as they read. In the first step, your job as a reader, students see their clear goals for reading. First, to support students with the academic vocabulary related to the reading strategy they will study, students create a word map. Having the students interact with these words through this consistent routine helps them internalize the habits of thinking about, exploring, and connecting words. The next step involves helping students unpack the thinking process using a step-by-step approach so students internalize the process related to the reading strategy in each unit. This is a critical step in the instructional plan and paves the way for student success when the reading selections is done on their own. Take a moment to pause this session and explore this part of the lesson so you can experience the power of this instruction. When you have finished, click play to resume the session. As you studied the instruction, did you notice on-page supports for students including definitions of elements of literature and academic vocabulary? It's always important to offer opportunities to put new learning into practice immediately. In Try and Experiment, students have that opportunity. This is also tied directly to the essential question. To help students check their own progress before moving on to the reading selection, the monitored comprehension support is built into the student book. And finally, as you work with flexible groups in your classroom, you will also have strategies to differentiate instruction throughout the reading selection to meet the needs of diverse classrooms and accommodate a variety of learners and learning styles. The next slide will take you directly to the Edge in Action website, where you will watch an Edge teacher deliver the How to Read lesson. The video will start automatically, but depending on your internet connection, it may take a few moments to load. The entire video will take approximately 25 minutes. If you don't have the time to watch it now, it's available 24/7 on the Teaching Edge under the Professional Development link. Now it's time to move into the cluster instruction. Remember, there are 3 clusters per unit, and just like each unit, each cluster follows the same instructional pattern. The first step in each cluster is the Prepare to Read lesson. Next is the Before Reading lesson for the main selection, where students are introduced to the literary element and reading strategy they will be focusing on. Then it's time to read the main selection. Following the reading of the main selection, students engage in a second Before Reading lesson that prepares them for reading the adjunct selection. At the end of each cluster, students deepen their understanding and extend their learning across the language arts through the Reflect and Assess and Integrate the Language Arts lessons. We will now take a deeper look at each of these lessons. The Prepare to Read lessons are designed to activate prior knowledge and build background for the entire cluster. 2 areas we know our students need help with prior to reading. First, students engage in a group discussion related to the essential question. This discussion focuses on a specific element of the essential question that connects it to the upcoming reading selections. Then students make a connection to the topic through a variety of quick activities, such as the anticipation chart seen here. If you are working with English learners and are using the Language and Grammar Lab, this is where you will see your first reference to those materials. It is here in the Prepare to Read lesson that you will introduce students to a specific language function that will help them in their discussions related to this cluster. Your Language Grammar Lab Teacher's Edition provides you with systematic, explicit instruction in an easy-to-use format. It also includes opportunities for daily language practice that is directly related to the selections the students are reading. I will continue to identify the additional references to the Language and Grammar Lab as we move through the cluster instruction. Now it's time to teach the key vocabulary. Before we look at the systematic, research-based routine that's used to teach the vocabulary, let's look at the key supports found on this page. Each word is highlighted throughout the text and includes a pronunciation, part of speech, and page where the word first appears. To help students get a clear understanding of the word's meaning, student-friendly examples rather than dictionary-style definitions are provided, as well as strong visual supports when possible. And notice the red dot next to the word evidence. This dot identifies words from the academic word list. Remember, these are words that transfer across all subject areas. All academic vocabulary words will be identified with this dot throughout Edge. When the Edge authors were selecting which words would be the focus of the key vocabulary lessons, they selected the words that matter most. This means that all key vocabulary words are central to comprehending the texts. Without knowing these words, the reading selection, its theme, main idea, or plot just won't make sense. The key vocabulary words are also personally valuable to the students because they need these words in order to discuss the essential questions. And these words are high-utility academic words that students will encounter in multiple subject areas and in life. Now that we know what type of words you will be teaching, let's take a look at the explicit, consistent, predictable routine that you will use to teach these words. Before students receive instruction in each word, it's important to have them rate themselves on their previous knowledge of the word. They can do this by holding their fingers close to their chest to represent their comfort level with the word. This is the first step in the routine. The next step is to guide students in correctly pronouncing the word by syllables and as a whole. Notice the ELL reference at the bottom. If you have English learners with Spanish as their native language, use the Spanish cognates list found behind the Vocabulary and Fluency Routines tab on page PD 44. Since English learners don't automatically recognize or make use of cognates, it is important to explicitly identify the words in the reading selections that have cognates. You may want to take a moment to tab this page in the front of your teacher's edition. The next step in the routine is to explain the meaning of the word using the clear, student-friendly examples provided. In the fourth step, students elaborate word meanings by generating their own examples and through practice. And finally, students work with a partner to practice the words using the vocabulary study cards they have created. At the bottom of the Prepare to Read lesson page in your teacher's edition, you can see that there are accompanying pages from the interactive practice book. It's important to make sure that students have these pages open and ready at the beginning of the Prepare to Read lesson. Here at the top of the interactive practice book page, you can see that the rating scale is provided. This first column will be the only one that is completed at the beginning of the lesson. The rest of the pages are to be completed following the instruction of all words. Now I'm going to model this routine so you can experience it. How well do you know the word synesthesia? Go ahead and hold up your fingers to represent your knowledge of the word. Don't worry, no one can see you. Our word is synesthesia. Synesthesia. Say it with me. Synesthesia. Do you notice anything familiar in the word? What looks familiar? Maybe syn or thesia. What word does it remind you of? Anesthesia? And what does that word mean? I'm going to step out of the routine for a moment and share the dictionary definition. Do you think this word would help your striving readers and English learners understand the meaning of the word? How about this student-friendly example? This morning I thought I had synesthesia. I heard music while I was eating a banana. People with synesthesia might taste sawdust when they touch velvet. Do these student-friendly examples help you understand the meaning of the word? Let's elaborate on the meaning a little. Do you have synesthesia if, when you eat a banana, you A, taste oranges, or B, hear Mozart? That's right, hear Mozart. Okay, how about this one? A person with synesthesia might, when he or she would smell dirt while eating a marshmallow, work? Of course it would. Okay, it's time to practice. For this example, let's pretend I asked you to create a definition map for the word. Here's what it might look like. Great! You just experienced a consistent, predictable routine you will be using with your students. Can you see how this will be helpful in preparing them for encountering these words in the upcoming selections? Remember, the key vocabulary in EDGE is drawn from both literature selections in a cluster. This way, students have multiple exposures to the same words and can develop and apply word meanings across multiple contexts. Don't forget to tab page PD 27 behind the Vocabulary and Fluency Routines tab, for additional information about this routine. You can see a video of the entire Prepare to Read lesson on the Edge in Action website. Now that we have taken a detailed look at the Prepare to Read lesson, let's move on to the Before Reading lesson for the main selection. The goal of this lesson is to provide highly scaffolded instruction in literary elements and the reading strategy. The lesson begins by using the text to teach the text. This simply means that you are presenting a short excerpt of the upcoming reading selection before reading and modeling skills or strategies with that text that are directly linked to the genre for this unit. Not only does this productive approach help struggling readers and English learners become engaged, it also helps nurture fluency and build background knowledge. To help you teach this lesson, there is reading transparency that will help reinforce students' understanding of the literary elements being taught. The red transparency icon in the teacher wrap reminds you that the transparency is available, and don't forget, these transparencies are all available online through the Teaching Edge, so you can use them with your LCD projectors, PowerPoints, or interactive whiteboards. In the bottom half of the page, the how-to of the reading strategy is explicitly modeled using the actual text students are about to read. This kind of text is a think aloud for the students so they can see exactly what they should be doing as they read. And again, there is reference to the interactive practice book pages. As you can see in their practice book, students practice applying what they've learned before in the Before Reading lesson. This highly supportive, explicit instruction in both the genre and the comprehension strategy before the students read prepares for reading success with the upcoming selection. Now it's time to build background, teach and practice the reading strategies, and have students apply what they've learned as they read the main selection. Pause the session and take a few moments to explore the instruction provided for reading the main selection. As you explore, keep your students in mind and look for specific supports for striving readers and English learners. When you have finished exploring, click play to resume the session. Now that you've had a chance to explore the instruction for reading the main selection, let's look at how one teacher, Mr. Gomez, reads the main selection with his class. We'll start on the opening page of the selection. On day one, as a whole group, he begins by building background for the selection, analyzing the visual, and discussing the critical viewing question. These steps help prepare students for success in reading and comprehending the selection. Mr. Gomez has a diverse group of learners in his class, including English language learners and striving readers. He uses differentiated instruction box at the bottom of the page, which directs him to preview the selection and have his English learners listen to the selection. He can do this by either reading it aloud, having them listen to the selection CD, or using the online coach. Keep in mind that even though these strategies are specifically targeted to English learners, some of your striving readers might also benefit from these supports. This is when Mr. Gomez breaks his students up into small groups. While some are listening to the selection CDs or the online coach, he has other buddies reading or reading selections independently. He groups his students based on their reading levels. Giving them this opportunity to read or listen to the selection without interruption allows them to get familiar with the text before the focus on the reading strategy begins. And don't worry, this is not the only time students will read the selection. I might also add here that this would be one important reason to be utilizing the placement test for the EDGE program. This will give you the opportunity to know exactly what the lexiling is of your students when they come into the EDGE program. Mr. Gomez begins day 2 of reading the selection with a brief, whole group review of what was discussed the day before. When he first started using EDGE, Mr. Gomez taught his students how to use all of the on-page supports they have access to right there in their student books or their e-editions. The key vocabulary is always highlighted within the text, and a brief definition is provided right there, so they don't have to flip through the book and get distracted. Some words or phrases are in bold within the text, which means they can be found here in the "In Other Words," which is an on-page glossary for idioms, colloquialisms, and other difficult words or phrases. For example, when you encounter the bold phrase "riveted to" in the text, here at the bottom it tells you that riveted to is the same as attached to or fastened to. And this means students don't have to go looking around to find out what something means. It's right here for them to use at the point of use. Students will also see questions that provide metacognitive prompts so they can immediately apply the reading strategy. The gray numbered boxes tell them exactly when they should ask themselves each question. And finally, there are frequent opportunities to monitor comprehension as they read. As Mr. Gomez moved through the units in EDGE, he found that he only needed to review these supports every once in a while just to make sure his students are using them to support their reading. During his small group instruction on day 2, Mr. Gomez has 2 groups of students he will be working with, his English learners and his striving readers. This is when he begins the interactive reading of the selection. That means he is going to provide a specific amount of time for the students to read a specific section or chunk of the text on their own. Then he will provide the reading support found in the teacher wrap to make sure they are applying the reading strategy appropriately. As you can see here, this differentiated instruction box provides him with some specific teaching strategies for each of his groups. Have you ever worked with a textbook where you have had to spend your own time determining where is the best place to stop? Well, one of the great things about EDGE is that each of these selections is already chunked for you, and it's very obvious when each new chunk begins. See these gray shaded strips here at the top of the page? Each fiction selection within EDGE will have something like this that asks students to set a purpose, preview, or predict before they read the following chunk. Each chunk will also end with a monitor comprehension reminder for students. For nonfiction selections, chunks are determined using section headings like students have previously seen in other content area texts. Now, while Mr. Gomez is reading a selection with his English learners, his other students are working with a partner or independently on a variety of different tasks. The students who are working in groups or pairs are not grouped by level. Mr. Gomez gives students the freedom to choose who they work with as long as they aren't disrupting the class. A few of them work as a group on one of the vocabulary routines, creating and using their vocabulary study cards, and he has a pair practicing their expression using the fluency routine. Another group began work on their unit project, and one student decided to read her EDGE library book and work in the student journal. If anyone finishes what they're working on before he's ready for them, Mr. Gomez posts an interactive practice book assignment on the board. If they don't finish it in class, they already know what they have to do for homework. Once Mr. Gomez's group finishes the interactive reading for the chunk they are working with, he will switch groups. Now, in order to make this run smoothly, Mr. Gomez spent some time at the beginning of the year teaching his students the classroom routines they will be using throughout the year. This is key in successful differentiated instruction. Mr. Gomez might also have some of his students working interactively or independently on the online coach. On day 3, Mr. Gomez does another whole group review of the reading and introduces the grammar focus for the cluster. In his small group, he will continue the interactive reading with the next chunk, and if necessary, he provides more detailed instruction for the grammar lesson. The students who aren't working with Mr. Gomez are working in pairs, groups, or independently on the routines, unit project, EDGE library, interactive practice book, or the grammar and writing practice book, or the online coach. However, today they will work on something they did not do yesterday. Basically, they rotate each day so that everyone completes all activities. This pattern continues until everyone is finished with the interactive reading of the selection. The amount of time it will take depends on the length of the selection and the amount of time you have with your students. Okay, I just mentioned Grammar Gallery, so let's take a deeper look at the daily grammar instruction, which helps you model and guide students through each grammar topic using the grammar transparencies. Within each cluster, there will be one grammar focus that is developed in the context of the selections and systematically builds oral and written skills. For example, in all 3 edge levels, the first grammar skill focuses on sentences. For each grammar focus, there will be 5 different grammar lessons that gradually develop that skill. As you move through the selections, you will see the grammar skills path in the bottom of the Teacher's Edition page. The red arrows indicate which step you are on. Next, right next to the grammar skills path, you will see a facsimile of the grammar transparency with the answers that is used for that lesson. You'll also see the built-in instruction for that transparency, which begins by teaching the grammar skill and modeling how it works using the top shaded portion of the transparency. Then students receive guided practice using the try it portion of the transparency. And finally, students practice what they've learned on their own in the Grammar and Writing Practice Book. Within the Grammar Skills path, you have probably noticed the ELL icon and its reference to the Language and Grammar Lab. If you will be using the Language and Grammar Lab, you will find a more detailed step-by-step lesson plan is available for each grammar transparency in the Language and Grammar Lab Teacher's Edition. Remember, we first used the Language and Grammar Lab during the Prepare to Read lesson to teach English learners a language function. Within the Language Grammar Lab Teacher's Edition, some grammar skills may lend themselves to potential language transfer issues. Some students who speak certain languages may have trouble transferring these grammar skills. If applicable, a language transfer transparency will be referenced and the instruction for that transparency will be found in the back of the Language and Grammar Lab Teacher's Edition, which also includes a detailed description of language transfer issues. Remember, the grammar skills path for the cluster extends through both the main selection and the adjunct selection. The great thing is, all of the grammar lessons follow the same instructional path. Finally, at the end of the reading selection, it's time for students to apply their knowledge by analyzing the selection. In this lesson, students answer questions about the selection, vocabulary, literary element, and reading strategy. Mr. Gomez works with the students in a whole group as they analyze what they've read. Students are asked to return to the text to reread and write on demand. And they also have the opportunity to review the selection and their learning in the interactive practice book. Now it's time to move on to the adjunct selection, which has its own before reading lesson because students will be working with a different genre and therefore they will focus on a new literary element and another element of the overarching reading strategy. Instruction for the adjunct selection follows the same pattern we just saw in the main selection. However, after students have read the adjunct selection, they have the opportunity to directly interact with the text in the interactive practice book. As you can see, the practice book includes a full color copy of the selection where they can reread and mark the selection to apply their knowledge and practice the reading strategy. The interactive practice book provides students with frequent opportunities to interact with the text and promotes active reading. Clear student instructions are built right into the page to help students focus on a specific reading purpose. At the end of the adjunct selection, you will also see a reminder to conduct a unit project progress check with your group of students. This reminder is found at the bottom of the Teacher's Edition page and helps both you and the students stay on track for completing the project. Every cluster ends with a Reflect and Assess lesson. In this lesson, students compare across texts and relate them to the essential questions, review vocabulary, develop reading fluency with one of the selections, and write in response to the literature. Pause the session and explore the Reflect and Assess lesson in your Teacher's Edition. As you explore, see if you notice how it helps deepen understanding by providing meaningful repetition and multiple exposures to vocabulary, additional fluency practice, opportunities for critical thinking, clear directions and explanations. This is also the time to assess your students using the Reader Reflection and Cluster test and to group your students as needed for reteaching based on their test results. The Integrate the Language Arts lessons provided additional opportunities to address and develop skills critical to student success across the areas of language arts, reading, writing, listening, and speaking. These lessons can be done as a review before giving the cluster test or as an additional opportunity for reteaching if necessary. Let's take a quick look at each section. First, this is where you will find the final step in the grammar skills path. Students review what they have learned throughout the cluster, so it's important to do this lesson before the cluster test. In the language development section, the same language function is addressed with an opportunity to assess that students have had multiple exposures to this language function in the unit. There is a literary analysis focus, which is always tied to the literary element and reading strategy. It is also here that we find opportunities to delve into vocabulary, such as prefixes, Greek roots, and multi-meaning words. Listening and speaking skills, such as conducting and participating in interviews, are covered. And writing is also covered, preparing students for state exams. In short, these lessons provide opportunities to revisit and extend the skills and strategies from the cluster before we move to the next cluster in the unit. When using the online lesson planner, you have the ability to add each individual section of the Integrate the Language Arts lesson. After the first and second cluster in each unit, students will engage in 1 or 2 workshops. The workplace workshop promotes out-of-school literacy by having the students research various jobs that may interest them. A few examples include a medical laboratory, a restaurant, a law office, and a veterinary clinic. The vocabulary workshop provides an additional focus on the vocabulary skills students are working with throughout the cluster, like context clues and making word connections. And the listening speaking workshop provides an additional focus on authentic listening and speaking opportunities, such as conducting interviews, participating in a panel discussion, delivering a dramatic reading, and participating in a debate. These workshops provide another great opportunity for students to work together in small groups, and they can easily be added into your online lesson plans. Now turn with me in your Teacher's Edition to the beginning of the writing project for your unit. You will see that the writing project is in the Teacher's Edition after the unit wrap-up, but you shouldn't wait until you've completed the unit to begin the writing project. If you have already created your first lesson plan using the online lesson planner, you will see that you begin the writing project right after you complete the first cluster. You don't want to start the project too soon because the reading they are doing in the first cluster is building their background for the type of writing they will be doing. Using this example from Level A, Unit 1, students first read a short story and now they are going to be writing a personal narrative. Now students have the ability to work on their projects throughout the remainder of the unit instead of focusing on just writing at the end. The writing instruction in EDGE has been developed based on the recommendations of the National Commission on Writing. They are also designed to help prepare students for success on their state writing exams. The instruction is dynamic, standards-based, and scaffolded. Be sure to read Dr. Michael Smith's author monograph on page PD 13, which identifies the best practices for teaching writing and how EDGE incorporates these practices right into the instruction. Take a look at the writing project overview page. Each project will focus on one writing mode, such as a personal narrative, short story, or reflective essay. Notice on the writing project overview page, there is a detailed description about the type of paper students will be writing. Having a chart with this description posted somewhere in the room can help keep your students focused on what is expected of them. Each project will also focus on one of the traits of good writing. On this project overview page, you will also see the teacher rubric for scoring the traits of good writing, and the appropriate trait will be highlighted. And every project takes students through each step of the writing process by providing step-by-step scaffolded instruction. Let's see how all of this ties together. Before students begin writing their own pieces, they have the opportunity to connect writing to their lives. This section of the project is designed to help students recognize that many of the abilities required by writing are ones that they demonstrate in their everyday lives. When students are aware of how this writing project connects to their life, it's time to teach them about the writing form or mode they will be using for this project. This is usually done with the help of a graphic organizer. If you are working with English learners, don't worry. All of the extra support you saw in the reading instruction is also built right into the writing project instruction as well. After teaching them about the writing form, students now have the opportunity to analyze a professional model of that form. Notice the built-in supports in the student book that explain different aspects of the writing. Now it's time for students to move through the steps of the writing process, beginning with pre-writing. But before they get started, clear goals and expectations are presented in your job as a writer. Then students are walked through the pre-writing process of choosing their topic, clarifying their audience, idea, and purpose, and gathering supporting information. Again, notice the built-in support to help them get started. As you saw in the reading instruction, EDGE continues to provide differentiated instruction opportunities for not only your English learners, but your striving readers and more advanced readers as well. To complete the pre-writing process, students need to organize their thoughts, often with the help of student model. Here you can see a technology tip that can help them as they organize their thoughts. These technology tips can be found throughout the writing project. Now it's time for students to finish their writing plan. Again, a student model is used to teach this process. A transparency is also provided for modeling this step. Once students have completed their writing plan, they are asked to reflect and share their thoughts with a partner. After they complete the pre-writing, students move on to their draft. In the drafting section, students are given the chance to analyze the student model. Not only is the student model available for the students in their book, but it's also available as a transparency. Step-by-step directions for analyzing this model are found in the teacher wrap. Once their draft is complete, students go through the process of revising their draft using a student-friendly rubric as a guide. On the Learning Edge, students can access additional writing samples and practice using the rubric to evaluate them. The rubric is also available and can be printed out so they can have their own copy with them as they finalize their piece. As students continue to revise their draft, they have the opportunity to conduct a peer conference and get a second opinion on specific aspects of the piece. Then students move on to editing and proofreading. In this step, students learn the correctness conventions they need to keep their audience focused on their ideas and not their errors. Writing transparencies help teach the students the writing mechanics they will be focusing on. Students also have the opportunity to practice these mechanics in their grammar and writing practice books. Then students analyze an edited version of the student model and identify what improvements were made. Finally, it's time for students to publish and present their piece. Students are given multiple choices for presenting the final piece. Some of these opportunities include reading their piece aloud and publishing it online. In the back of their student book, students have access to a language and learning handbook that they can use to get pointers on how to share their piece successfully. And when all is said and done, students are asked to reflect on their writing. Before we move on to the unit wrap-up, I just wanted to reiterate that the writing project is not the only writing students perform in EDGE. At the end of each selection, Students return to the text to reread and write as they analyze the text. At the end of each cluster, students write about their literature as part of the Reflect and Assess lesson. In the Integrate the Language Arts lesson, at the end of each cluster, students complete a writing assignment using all steps of the writing process. And throughout the units, students have additional writing opportunities and content area connections, which are found in the teacher wrap. They also have the opportunity to practice their writing in assessments for both the cluster and the unit tests. The unit wrap-up gives students an opportunity to present their completed unit projects to you and the class. They are also asked to evaluate all class projects, including their own, using the unit project evaluation rubric found on the Learning Edge. Next, students reflect on the reading they have done throughout the unit. This includes all of the selections and the Edge library book they selected. Students can work with a partner or small group to discuss how the genre focus and reading strategy related to their readings. And finally, it's time to revisit the essential question and bring everything back together. In the teacher wrap, you will also see a cumulative vocabulary review that you can use with students before they take their unit tests. If you've been utilizing e-assessment, you would also be able to utilize the data you've gleaned over the past course of the unit. As you can see, EDGE includes a lot of instruction designed to help your striving readers and English learners prepare for graduation. However, if you don't have the luxury of extended class time with your students, you may be wondering how you're going to fit all this in. Well, another one of the great features in EDGE is that right up front, you can see exactly which skills are going to be tested. Here is an example of the instructional focus page that is found at the beginning of each unit. Using this key, here at the bottom of the page, we can see what types of skills are being tested. The red T's are skills tested on cluster tests and or reading and literacy analysis tests. The blue T's are skills tested on the unit grammar and writing test. And the green T's are skills tested on language acquisition assessment. You can also see the tested skills, still color-coded, in the objectives box for each lesson. As you can see in these three examples, sometimes everything in the lesson will be tested, while other lessons may only have a few elements that will be tested. These T's are your answer. They are your non-negotiables because if it's a tested skill in EDGE, it's a tested skill on standardized state tests. So they help you easily identify which lessons and parts of lessons are needed to be covered. Now let's take a look where you will find all of the assessments and tools you will need for monitoring your students' progress. Here is a list of all the assessment tools available in EDGE, and except for the placement and gains tests and the unit retests, everything is available right there in your assessment handbook and online on the Teaching Edge. The Reading Placement Gains test places students into the appropriate level of EDGE by reading level. The Reading Gains test comes in 3 parallel forms, so it can be used throughout the year to show the gains students are making in their reading level. Both of these assessments result in a Lexile level. The Language Gains test also has 3 parallel forms to determine students' language proficiency level, beginning, intermediate, or advanced. These can be used throughout the year to show the gains students are making in language development. There are 4 main assessment tools in EDGE that will help you monitor the progress of your students. The cluster tests, unit tests for reading and literary analysis and grammar and writing, the language acquisition rubrics, and the unit reflection and self-assessments. We'll begin with the cluster tests. Cluster tests are formative evaluations designed to measure key vocabulary, literary analysis, comprehension, and reading strategies. Each cluster test focuses on the specific instruction and reading selections within the cluster, and they are designed to check student progress and provide an early indicator that reteaching or additional instruction may be necessary. After scoring your students' tests, using the answer key in the back of the assessment handbook, seen here on the left, use the student profile for cluster tests to determine if the students need reteaching. If a student doesn't master a specific reporting category, reteaching is necessary. All of this can, of course, be done on e-assessment as well. You may want to create a chart similar to this one you see here, so you can easily keep track of which students need reteaching in each reporting category after completing the student profile sheets. If your school or district has purchased e-assessment, all of this will be done for you automatically once your students' answer sheets have been scanned or they complete the cluster test online. Be sure to check back for On-Demand Module 4, Getting Started with EDGE e-assessment, to learn how to access these reports. In the Reading and Literary Analysis unit test, students apply the key concepts and skills they have learned throughout the unit, across all three clusters, to new reading selections and material. These tests are designed to be rigorous and thereby familiarize students with state test formats. The Reading and Literary Analysis unit test assesses students in vocabulary strategies, key vocabulary, literary analysis, comprehension and critical thinking, and reading strategies. The Grammar and Writing unit test assesses students on the key grammar and writing skills they were taught in the unit. Key domains include grammar, revising and editing, and written composition. Just like the cluster tests, use the answer key in the back of the assessment handbook to score your students' unit tests, and use a student profile for unit tests to determine if the student needs reteaching. If a student doesn't master a specific reporting category, reteaching is necessary. Okay. I've mentioned reteaching a few times now, so let me show you where you find the reteaching lessons that are already developed for you. Begin by logging into the Teaching Edge at hbedge.net. After selecting Access Resources from the opening page, click on the Reteaching Lessons link at the bottom of the menu. All of the reteaching lessons for this unit are here on this screen. This column contains a link to the PDF for the most of the reteaching lessons. The only reteaching lessons that are not available through a link are the reteaching lessons for grammar. Grammar reteaching is done using the Language and Grammar Lab and the Grammar and Writing Practice Book. Once you click on the link for the appropriate reteaching lesson, the PDF opens and you're ready to print. Here you can see a sample reteaching lesson for the key vocabulary. Many of the reteaching lessons are the same for every unit, but they offer a variety of practice opportunities. But before you print, make sure that you specify which pages you might want to be focusing on. In some cases, there are as many as 79 pages, and you may not want to print the entire reteaching packet. Mr. Gomez writes the date he used a specific practice activity so he can alternate the activities evenly. Here is a part of the literary analysis reteaching lesson. This is a 15-page document, but it is the same document for all literary analysis reteaching needs. On the front of the reteaching packet for literary analysis, you can see which literary devices and elements are tested in each unit and which pages of the packet contain the reteaching lessons for that element. Mr. Gomez spent some time at the beginning of the year printing out the reteaching lessons and putting them into a binder with dividers for each reporting category. This way he can easily keep track of which reteaching lessons he has already used, and he has them all ready to go for the next cluster test. Each unit in EDGE contains numerous opportunities for students to use language as they participate in authentic communication. You can use the language acquisition rubrics as you observe students during activities to assess their progress in language acquisition. Each unit offers 3 performance assessment opportunities in language development, and you can work with pairs or small groups so that the assessment process is manageable. These language development assessment opportunities are part of the Integrate the Language Arts lesson. Personal interests and attitudes affect motivation. Motivation is an important factor in reading and writing performance. The affective measures provided will help you and your students pursue their interests in and examine their attitudes toward reading and writing. The metacognitive ability to monitor, evaluate, and adjust the processes used while reading and writing is essential to become an effective reader and writer. The metacognitive measures help you and your students think about and improve the ways they read and write. The affective and metacognitive measures are found toward the back of the assessment handbook. As you can see, there are measures for both reading and writing. All of the information I have just shared regarding the EDGE assessments comes directly from the front of the assessment handbook. Be sure to take some time reading through this information and finding the assessments that will work best for you and your students. Congratulations! You've almost completed the 3rd on-demand module for EDGE. In this session, we took a detailed look at the instruction for an entire unit, including the unit launch and all of the clusters. We walked through the writing project and saw the other lessons, where writing occurs within EDGE. And finally, we just finished an in-depth look at the assessment tools EDGE offers for progress monitoring and reteaching. Here are some next steps to think about before your next session. Use your assessment handbook to find the assessment tools that work best for you, your school, your district, and most importantly, your students. Go to the Teaching Edge and access the Reteaching Lessons. And finally, take a few moments to complete the evaluation on the next slide to be entered into a monthly drawing for a $50 National Geographic Learning gift certificate. You may also want to contact your local representative to find out more about e-assessment and the online coach. Thank you for attending, and don't forget to check the Attachments tab on the left side of the screen for your certificate of completion, and check back soon for your next module.